to Green Book Discussions. Green Book Discussions. This is new. This is a Black Educator Compendium, a Black space free of discomfort, discrimination, segregation, and insult, participating in discussions, forums, collaborative professional developments around the topics and interests of our community. We are writing, right? Like writing and rewriting and writing the narrative. Welcome to Green Book. Our guests today are Peddie, Director of Leadership at BES, Building Excellent Schools, Candace Person, Teacher Leader at Veritas Prep Charter School and Anti-Racism Fellow, and Tashi Jones, Teacher Leader at Duggan Academy and owner of Sweet Tea's Cupcakery. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. How are you guys?
Welcome. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. I'm so excited. Green Book Discussions is aptly named after the Green Book Motorist Club that was happening during Jim Crow South. And we wanted to make sure that people who were traveling through the South know exactly where to go and when to go to places that were going to be safe for them. And so I really appreciate you coming here to this space, Green Book Compendium, to make sure that still lives on, right? In this space, we are still supporting one another and knowing that you guys are in a safe space to discuss freely. You're also in a safe space to move exactly we would move normally, and that you're going to be free from judgment here. And that in this space, it is just our truths and solutions to getting to what we have to get to. We know that there are problems, not only within our community, but definitely outside of our community. And we are trying to have solutions for what's happening in our collective areas, right? We are coming with solutions. So there are going to be questions that we're going to ask today, and then we're going to come with solutions. All right, here we go. I am going to share my screen with you just because I want to start off with our questions, and we'll get right into it. We have about, I'm actually not going to put a time limit on each question. So as soon as we get through the questions, we'll go to the next one. Our first question, in education, what do we as a people want and need for our scholars at this moment, and how do we get it? I'm going to show us from this view so we can still see the question, and the audience and our audience can still see the questions and see who is answering those questions. All right, so in education, what do we want as a people and need for our scholars at this very moment? I'm going to just give us a little backdrop in regards to that. In the last 20 years, African Americans have been scoring the lowest in regards to standardized testing. We have fallen behind now the Latino population when it comes to reading and writing. And I want to know, what do we need as a people, being that all of us are in education at this very moment? What do we need and want for our scholars at this moment, and how do we get it? And especially as it relates to remote learning, right? How are our scholars going to survive in this remote atmosphere? What do we want and need for our scholars? And how do we get it? Jabari, we'll start off with you.
Yeah, awesome. Just quick sound check. Can you all hear me well?
Yeah, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. I can't start without acknowledging how beautiful each of those children are, and that image that you chose to select there. They remind me very much of the children that I just had the privilege of leading. I was a principal for 6 years, and each one of my babies were Black, brilliant, brown, and beautiful. And this picture is truly representative of that.
Awesome.
I'm going to be really concise. We need teachers who are constantly interrogating their own biases and their own prejudice. And I say that because people quickly run to, oh, we need culturally responsive pedagogy. Yes, that is absolutely true. However, we need to really challenge who are the people who are orchestrating that education, who are the people who are delivering that education, and are they, or that content rather, and are they delivering that content free of bias? I think that the curriculum can be as rich as you need it to be, but if the actual educator, the conduit of that education, is not someone who is delivering that curriculum and that content free of bias, then they're going to put their own spin on it. And I think they will continue to paint a narrative that is inaccurate, and a narrative that is ripe with fallacies and just misconceptions about who we are as a people. And so I think the first thing is having educators who are constantly interrogating their own biases, and then having, of course, the tool being this really rich curriculum that is reflective of our students' lives and their experiences, I think are two of the things that we want and need in this particular moment.
Very good, thank you. I'm going to come back to one of those things after all of our panelists answer that question. Candace, can you go next?
Absolutely. Just thinking about that question, there's so many ways that you can go with it, you know, specifically when we're thinking about, I totally agree with Jabari, like we have to have educators who are willing to address their biases. But I think specifically when just thinking about just how remote learning highlighted the disparities in our communities and the challenges, thinking about as a parent, how teachers communicated with me, you know, about my child, how some of my colleagues were communicating with their families and the expectations that we had. And then thinking about the lift that students had. So like some of the students in our public schools that we thought we were preparing and we thought that we were rigorous with them, we're realizing that they're not prepared. It wasn't an easy, smooth transition for some of our students to go into remote learning because what we were asking of them are things that they've never done before. So I think we have to really understand how we're preparing our students. I think we have to be willing to reach across the aisle and in a way and understand who our families are and who our students are, what they want and what they need, and really look at how we're preparing them to be successful. I think the things that our students were asked to do remotely very much mirror the things that we're asked to do as adults in our own professional lives. Why can't our kids do these things? Why are they so behind? You know, and when I think about my friends and colleagues who have kids that may go to private schools or more privileged schools, and they don't have those same challenges. It's a seamless transition in a lot of ways. So I think that our children need people that are going to be willing to step outside of the box and understand who they are, understand their communities, understand their families, and be willing to challenge those things that just continue to create this disparity for them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Tashi.
So I totally agree with Jabari when he says that as educators, we have to constantly challenge our own bias. When I came into education, I thought like I was doing it for the right reasons until one day I was asked the question, is the work that I'm putting in front of my students, am I proud of it? And being asked that question, I thought like, I think it could be more rigorous. And I had to really question myself as to, well, why am I not getting rigorous work? What is the mindset behind that? So challenging my own thought process and understanding as an educator that I have to check myself sometimes. And as educators, we have to really sit back and reflect, what is the best for our students? And am I able to achieve that for them? Showing that my students that I'm ever evolving, ever changing in the benefit of them. And I think that really came into play with this remote learning, where as frustrating as it may have seemed, I had to kind of go above and beyond to let my kids know, like, even though this is a uncomfortable transition, we got this. And if I'm willing to put in the effort and the work to make sure you got this, we're gonna be okay. Mm-hmm. We're gonna be okay.
I love that. Thank you. That was greatly said in regards to, am I proud of the work that I am putting in front of my students? Mm-hmm. I think that is the questions that should be on the front of every teacher, every educator, every superintendent's mind. And I think what we saw this year in regards to the remote learning and the actual verbiage that came out of our superintendents and our, I'm going to say Commissioner's mouse. Thank you. Our commissioner's mouth. I was trying to go around it, but I shouldn't. Thank you. This is a safe space. Our commissioner's mouth did not add up with the mission, with what was going on, with what we expect for our children. The expectation and the language were two completely different things, right? We expect our children to excel. We expect our children to make gains. We expect our children to exceed, succeed, and be successful. But then we lower the bar in regards to what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. And I think that question that Tashi asked was so imperative, right? Am I proud of the work I'm putting in front of my students? Not only am I proud of it, would I put this work in front of my own children, right? Would I lessen the work for my own children, right? And so I'm going to go back to Candace, when you said reaching across the aisle. Can you tell me what that means? We know exactly what that means politically, right? Right. Democrats reaching across the aisle to Republicans, or Republicans reaching across the aisle to independents, or whatever it takes. But when you say reaching across the aisle, can you paint that picture for me?
Absolutely. I can tell you an exact example. We started remote learning when March 13th, sometime around that. It probably wasn't until sometime after almost the end of the school year. And a teacher called me for my son for the first time.
Okay, so
and he didn't say, "How are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I just want to call you and tell you that your son owes me ABC."
Hold on.
And I laughed.
Hold on 1 second. Let me just back up and frame this. The official last day of school was like March 12th, right? That was that Friday, March 12th or 13th. They went
March
back
13th.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it was like Friday the 13th. And boom, no kids went back to school the very next day. Nobody went back on that Monday. And so you're saying from March 18th. And today's guests, now all the time we're not going to have guests that are in Massachusetts, but today's guests are from Massachusetts, right? You guys are in Massachusetts, even if you're not from Massachusetts. So you guys go to school until when? Like
the end of June.
To the end of June.
The middle to the end of June.
The middle to the end of June. So you're saying from March 13th until the middle of June, you did not hear from any of your instructors for your children's instructors.
Many of them, the work was inconsistent, the communication was inconsistent. And I said, "We're fine." When he called, I said, "We're fine. Thanks for asking." Because that's the problem. That is the problem. People are not willing to take the extra step. I called, I tried. That's all I have for you. And that's not enough. You know, and I say that as a product of the schools and the community that I teach, and a passion to really understand what's happening. You know, I think you have to know what's happening and what your families want and what they need. You know, they're having this conversation about how we're going to reopen. And I read the whole report, the Massachusetts report on what the expectations are.
Yeah.
There were no parent voices in that. There were no considerations about childcare and essential workers, which the majority of our families are. You know what I mean? They're not asking our families what they need. They're saying, "We want kids in classroom. It's a priority to be in the classroom, and we're going to figure it out." But you're not understanding what's happening. And I think if we go down the line and we say, who was successful during remote learning and what did you do? I bet you a common thing is going to be, I communicated with my families. I understood what my students needed. I understand. You know, I never said to my parents, I said, "Are you okay?" Before I say anything about work, what do you want for your child during this remote learning time? What is your goal? What's realistic? How are you doing?
Absolutely.
Are you guys safe? Do you have food? You know what I mean? Do you have everything that you need?
The essentials.
You know what I mean?
Need laundry detergent, soap? What do you need? You know, how can we help you in regards to those resources?
And I think it's easier for people who are not sharing the same racial, affiliation to kind of just brush that off, you know, and I think that's not okay. You know, and so when I say reach across the aisle, and I will say this until the day I die, I'm talking about digging into the communities that your students are from, that you claim that you care so much about, understanding what they want and what they need. And you move forward together with that common understanding.
I talked to my parent and my parent said, I want my son to work hard. I want to make sure that he's successful. Okay, now that I know that that's what you want for this remote learning time, we're going to move forward toward these goals together.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And I think that's that piece that's missing. And if they don't do it, they're going to continue to get it wrong. And I feel like we're on a crash course with the push to reopen schools without hearing community and parent voices.
I think that is so vital to success, right? I don't know what the trepidation is in regards to parent communication, but most times the people who are afraid to communicate with parents are the people who don't look like the child.
Mm-hmm.
Are the people who do not look like the child, right? So those teachers who are afraid to communicate, who are afraid to reach out, they're not of the same ethnicity, they're not from the same cultures or the same background, or like Candace said, they do not have the same community involvement and community engagement. Even if you are different, but you are involved in the community or you're engaged in the community, you know, right? The first question shouldn't have been, what your child is missing or anything like that. When you understand that everything is going to be shut down in this area and we are in food deserts, right?
Yeah.
This community that we reside in, that we teach in, is a food desert, right? And so now schools are closed, places are closed. We can't get to where we have to go. We don't even have transportation to get to where we have to go. What do you need? What resources do you need? How can I help you be successful, right?
Yeah.
And then move forward from that. That definitely, parent communication is definitely the number one, right? It's vital, right?
If I can jump in for a moment, Candace, first, I just want to thank you for sharing that personal story. And it's so important that we have a parent on the line here to amplify the voices of the parents. So I think we're often the forgotten group in this shift to remote learning. Parents have been vaulted to the position of the lead instructor, whereas prior to that, they were supplementing instruction. And there was no training, there was no learning curve. It was just immediately jump in and do it, and completely under-resourced and underprepared to continue like the high quality and rigorous instruction that our children require. But what I was going to share is that all of the instances that Candace shared, those are, in my estimation, a symptom of a much larger problem. Those to me are signs that empathy is not part of the DNA of the school, of many schools. Those are signs that the school leaders themselves aren't setting really clear expectations for what is required from their teachers during this time. And it also signals to me that the school leader, him or herself, they are also detached from the communities that they're serving. I know specifically people who are leading schools who are driving 40, 50 miles into the community to work there, and then 40, 50 miles out. They're not actually living and breathing the air and the smog that are in these communities. And I think those are all part of the problems, right? And when we talk about empathy, empathy comes from your proximity to the problem, and people are so distant from what is actually happening and what actually matters most, which is why you probably weren't receiving those phone calls. And I would say that many schools, phone calls aren't part of their expectations, and they probably weren't making phone calls prior to that. And so we're just seeing symptoms exacerbated in a world of remote learning. And I think we need a significant tune-up, and it starts to me with leadership. We talked about what our superintendent did or did not say, what our commissioner did or did not say, what our principals aren't saying, and what they aren't demanding from the people who are having such a tremendous impact on the livelihood and the success of our children. So it's about empathy, and it's about expectations, and it's about proximity to the problem, in my estimation. And to the question, like, how do we get it? I think we need to really start to address those three things that I lifted up.
Yeah, definitely. Tashi, did you want to add something before we move on to the next question?
I think it was said very well. But I definitely agree that parental input is definitely needed. Working in our school system in Springfield, we don't ask enough what is needed from these parents. And we can't also make the generalization that everybody has the same resources. So it's important to make sure we reach out and ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to move on to this next question. In this next question, I want us to understand that the culture in which we reside, we have learned our entire lives how to survive, right? We have learned our entire lives how to continue and push forth. And I am asking you to look at that question from that realm, right? In the sense of not just surviving, right? Freeing yourself was one thing, but claiming ownership of that free self was another. This is taken from Toni Morrison's book, Beloved. And I want to know, what role does this quote, what is the role of this quote for us as a people and a culture today? When we have
I think the assumption,
Go ahead.
Is it okay if I speak? I think the assumption is that we're free. Right? I think that's the thing. And when I look at this quote, it's saying claiming ownership of that freed self was another. But we realize with everything that's happening in the racial unrest and the political climate of the world, that a lot of those barriers are still there. Mm-hmm. So when I first saw this, I thought self-actualization, but then the second thing I thought was, are we really free? You know, and
that's interesting. That's interesting that you say that, because Martin Luther King said, right, injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. So if one person is not free, nobody is free, right? But then there are people who say, like Nelson Mandela, my mind was free. I was never incarcerated for 27 years because I was beyond the actual environment that I was in. And we as educators have seen children successfully do that, right? Go beyond the environment that they live in, that they do not rely on and or treat whatever it is that they have to do as a barrier. We know students who have to babysit their younger brothers and sisters and still get their homework in and still make straight A's and still are doing the best they absolutely can. We have students who are homeless and still are making sure that they are doing what's necessary. And so when I was thinking of this, I was not thinking in regards to, are we actually free, but do we know, right? Are we claiming what is our freedom? And are we concerned with the systemic racism that is happening surrounding us, or around us or not? Tashi, do you want to start?
Yes, I will. So freeing yourself was one thing, claiming ownership of the free self was another. So when I look at that quote, I agree with Candace where she said, are we really free? And I feel like in our workplace, I know that I'm free, but I feel like I'm free with a certain amount of barriers. So I'm free until I have to question the texts that are put in front of these kids, as far as why is this a monolithic standpoint? Why can't we have more diverse? Or when I'm addressing a problem with a coworker, I'm free until I'm passionate about what I'm talking about, and then I'm a hostile or angry
Black woman.
So I feel like I'm free, but with certain limitations about that. And maybe the better question is, or the better thought process is, because I'm free, I'm no longer responsible for dealing with people's fragility. I do have the right to question these texts. I do have the right to not be put labels on as hostile or angry, but I'm simply holding people accountable, and not to be afraid to do that.
I love that. I am not bound by your fragility, right? That's the freedom that I'm working within. I'm not bound by your fragility, and I'm going to question what it is that you're going to put in front of the children, because I question myself with that. Jabari, do you want to add?
Yeah, that is a powerful quote, Tashi. I'm gonna take that from you. So I appreciate you sharing that gem. And frankly and vulnerably, it captures exactly how I have existed, specifically in Boston. I moved from Atlanta to Boston, and in Atlanta, I felt this idea of free.
Mm-hmm. That's
And
right.
in
You were at
Boston,
Morehouse, right?
yeah, you see, representing on the hat.
Yeah. Right.
And so, but moving to Boston, I felt like I entered into a certain professional captivity, if you will.
Mm.
And it's this idea of who they want me to be. When I say who, I'm talking about white hegemony, right? I'm talking about what white culture demanding of some person who presents themselves as a Black man, and what he is supposed to be in the roles that he has been in.
Mm.
And often what I found is that I subscribed to that, right? And I lost sight of myself, and I lost sight of the things that really mattered to me, and I lost sight of my own principles. And because I lost sight of my principles, I felt this captivity. And so what I would say to Candace's early point, like, what is free? Are we free? I personally am on my journey to freedom. I am freeing myself more and more each day. And I think about, Bob Marley, we must emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, right? I subscribe to these notions and these archetypes of what it is that I should be.
Mm.
And I completely neglected who it is that I want to be. And I'm on that journey now to determining that self-actualization that is necessary for my own growth and for the spaces that I'm responsible for leading in, whether that be my school or my passion project with the Teachers Lounge. All of those things are really important, that I fully actualize who I am, who I'm purposed to be, and the power of my presentation, my power of how I present and walk this world, and the effect that can really have, the seismic effect that can have on helping to create other free structures for our students and our colleagues.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you are honest enough in this space to say this is a part of my journey, right? And that's what this is about. This is a part of the journey. I think for me, one of the things that I really love about this quote and about Toni Morrison, period, and that I remind myself on a daily basis, right? A quote from Nina Simone. Nina Simone said, one, freedom is absolutely having no fear, right? Where I am not afraid of being who I am and having that Blackness of me, right? Being totally committed to my whole being, right? I'm not going to leave parts of me outside of the door when I walk in.
Yeah.
And Toni Morrison, in that same space, I love this quote because her essence within itself always reminded us, even when she was being interviewed, how does it feel to be a Black writer? Are you ever going to change from writing about Black stories, right? Even in her responding to that, her saying, I actually love being called a Black writer, but I'm tired of the question because I am not the one with the problem. You guys are the one with the problem in regards to me acknowledging that I am a Black writer, right?
Yeah.
You are the person who says to me that I should go outside of this realm so I can please you, and please, yeah, please make it more accessible, or make it more attentive to you. And I choose not to do that. And I choose not to do that. And she said it so eloquently all the time. She never changed in regards to that. And so that was one of the reasons why this question was there, because I do understand that, Jabari, that sometimes we have to move on a journey, and it's continual growth.
Mm-hmm. I didn't answer that question.
Oh, I thought you started. I'm sorry, because I thought you said, what is freedom?
Candace. Oh, I did, but I wanted to just build on that just a little bit, especially after hearing Jabari, because he kind of made me think about myself, and that this is a continuum, because I totally relate to you in that way, because I feel like only by exploring racism and understanding its impact and figuring out how I wanted to move, and as a trainer and a person who's still exploring my own understanding, I'm I'm understanding what that freedom is too, and being unapologetic about my Blackness. But it is a continuum. And there's a couple of thoughts that I wanted to just talk about. So first, when you were talking about like being in Atlanta, I thought about that too, because in my community, I was in a lot of white circles, and I was usually the only Black person, because the enrichment opportunities oftentimes didn't involve people that looked like me. My mother was very, very conscious about making sure that I had those enrichment opportunities. And so the first time that I got around my community where I felt free was when I went to Howard.
Okay, let's
but then
go.
It's been a continuum of up and down. In certain spaces, I feel more free. I feel more myself when I'm engrossed in my community, and that's very different from like when I'm in white spaces and I feel doubtful. I feel unsure. I feel like I wonder if I'm good enough. I wonder, I feel like you get that white, you get that Black, that inferiority, that we experience, and it wasn't until I understood what that was and had a language to describe that I began to kind of free myself from that way of thinking. So I definitely think that it's a continuum. And the other thing that I want to say is that thinking about, the English major in me and thinking about the story of Beloved.
Yes, English major.
Setha wasn't free until her community was around her. She carried the burden and the pain, and that's what that ghost was. And so that's what really resonates with me about that we are free within our community. And I'm just going to keep saying that because community is so vital and is so important and for our students. And I think that's kind of what it reminds me of, thinking about claiming ownership of your freedom. A lot of times it involves your community, and that to feel empowered and to feel like a strong sense of who you are.
Yeah.
Can I add really quickly? I think it's this idea. I absolutely agree with you around the feelings of community. It's this concept to me of representation as well. I would feel more free in I mentioned this idea of like professional captivity. I would feel more free in those spaces if there were people flanking me left and right who looked like me or shared similar experiences to me. I'd feel more free if there are people who were a tier above me, management, C-suite folks who looked like me, represented the things that I represent, shared the same experiences that I experienced. Because I feel as if though I had some, not just representation, but some confidence, right? And I'd have some persons to lean on in situations in which I feel like this white smog would be doubting me and combating me. But at least I know that, hey, I can lean on my brother or I can lean on my sister because they got me. And so I feel you on the idea of community, which is why it's so important that we have representation we have 360-degree representation wherever sector it is that you work in, so you can feel protected and you can have allyship there.
That's very good. That leads us right into this next question, right? As educators, understanding that race is a social construct, how do you, in your Blackness, thrive, survive, and exist within systemic racist structures, within the systemic racist structures where you work? I didn't say that right, so I'm going to read it again. As educators, understanding that race is a social construct, how do you, in your Blackness, thrive, survive, and exist in the systemic racist structures you work within? Thank you. I can't read. I also want to make this note there that everybody who is on the panel all graduated from HBCUs.
Okay, let's go.
Represent. And this question in regards to community and maybe not having the community needed, like you need that 360 community that Jabari was saying. How are you able to thrive, survive, and exist within these systemic racist structures?
It's a really heavy question. There's so many different layers there and a lot to unpack. If you would allow me to just lead off, and I'll probably come back to this where I can share more baked thoughts. But this idea of surviving is real, right? Because often we feel like we're having to survive every single day, no matter how successful we are still feeling as if we have to survive. And The way that I have been surviving is returning to my principles, returning to the things that I absolutely believe to be true about
Can you repeat that,
humanity.
Jabari? You kind of fading out a little bit. Say that a little
Yeah,
louder, please.
for sure. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Yeah, I said that the way that I have survived is this. I've returned to my principles. I've returned to the very things that I believe to be true about humanity, and all of us coexisting with each other. And one of them being equity, right? That's one of my principles, is this idea of equity and fairness, if you will. In that, I let that be known. I lead with my principle of equity, and it doesn't matter how inequity shows its ugly face in my schools or the spaces in which I'm responsible for leading in. But I make sure that I elevate that to the very top, and that means that any marginalized or oppressed person, specifically in our context, focusing on the blackness of our skin, any person who presents themselves as Black, brown, or person of color, I'm making opportunities available to them. I'm availing to them the resources and the experiences that are going to be enriching and that are going to like catapult them to these levels of as I said before, this 360 degree of like representation. Because once I leave, I can't take that system with me, and I need it to be a self-sustaining system. And the way that happens is by coaching and developing people to take on positions and take the mantle and move forward with this. So I've really been prioritizing my principles, and that core principle to me is this idea of equity, and specifically through the lens of availing opportunities to people of color, specifically my Black and brown brothers and sisters.
I like that. You're saying that, okay, for so long we've had to survive, but in order for us to survive in these areas that we work within, we have to actually leave a blueprint that is going to allow for equitable interchanges and inclusive interchanges within that motif. That's good. I like that. I like that. Tashi or Candace?
I think we kind of touched on it a little bit when we answered the last question, and we talked about that continuum or that process of really coming to terms with our own sense of who we are, and idea of freedom. What I'm thinking about when I see this question is that even though race is a social construct and it might be, false in a way, I think you have to acknowledge its existence, right? You can't just say, well, it doesn't exist, so I'm not going to deal with it, right? Because out of sight, out of mind, if I don't acknowledge that, I'm Black because of a system, of oppression, and they call me Black, and you own that, to say that doesn't exist and there is to erase everything and to invalidate. And I think we have to acknowledge that my Blackness has created, has had many repercussions or, consequences and impacted this system in so many ways. And so that's kind of what comes to mind when I think about that question. How do we thrive, survive? I definitely agree with Jabari. I think that's kind of what I've been doing in the last few years in my own work is, how do I duplicate this? And how do I become solutions oriented in a way that I don't like what I'm seeing here, but let me move forward in a way that can dismantle it and make it easier for the people that come behind me. And I think that's so important. But I think the first step is just acknowledging, like, you have to own it. It might be a social construct and it might be, this false kind of concept, but at the same time, it exists. And it has determined the way we move within our, communities, within our workplaces,
Exactly.
So I think you have to acknowledge it first.
Yeah. Tashi?
So going off what Jabari said about the principles and my Blackness, I think that my Blackness is part of the reason why I became an educator in the first place. I start off with my students telling them the reason why I even wanted to become a teacher, because at one point we weren't allowed to learn. And those opportunities weren't afforded for us, so we made our own. And so I'm standing before them, giving them the tools necessary to make sure that they don't just exist or survive, but actually thrive, despite what them being Black or brown. Passing on that same knowledge that was given to me that helped me thrive. I stand in my truth. I stand in my truth as a Black woman, and want to pass that on to my babies as well, that despite all, they can thrive.
Yep.
Yeah, I love this question, because it is a lot. It is a lot to unpack, and it is a lot for us to think about and deal with on a daily basis. And I think this question is how we enter into those structures, right?
Yeah.
This question is full, it's meaty. We have to think about so many things in regards to surviving ourselves. You know, for you as a Black man, Jabari, what are some of the things that you're positioning, how you stand, how you respond? Those are all survival for you, right?
Yeah,
like if
completely.
you raise your voice, maybe to the wrong person or maybe to the right person, right? Your voice needed to be raised to the right person. And how is that going to be taken in these racist structures? And who will call the police, or who would think you're being aggressive, or who will just put you in a position where your life might be taken, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not negating the fact that also happens to women, especially, to Black women, and that the burden and the weight that Black women have to come into work with, knowing that their ideas might get shot down, maybe even stolen, taken and praised by their counterparts, that their everyday push in regards to equity work, in regards to what it is that should be student-facing instructions, is going to have to, it might get pushed back, and that this work is continual, and that educators and school systems are now in this space of, we have to be equitable, but are we really wanting to be equitable? Do you really want to hear what is happening in the school systems, and do you really want to change that thought process, right? Or not even the thought process, but change what is systematically happening, right? On a continual basis. And then are you going to provide the space for people of color to say, I'm not going to teach you about your racism. You have to do the bias work yourself, and do this work within yourself, and come with that framework of saying, I'm biased here and I know it, right? Just like a psychologist would, right? And not be able to work with a client where they have biases, and be able to say that freely.
Yep.
And
you know what
go ahead.
So you know what I love about this question as well, Dr. Jones, is that you asked it on the continuum of surviving and thriving. I spoke about how I've survived. The way that I've thrived, and it's bringing this conversation full circle for me specifically, is that I started to thrive when I embraced my Blackness, when I leaned into my Blackness, when I started to use it as an instrument, when I started to use it as a tool to really define my success and define my strengths. And what ended up happening as a result of that is I didn't, specifically as in my capacity as a principal, I didn't do it to please my largely white school. I did it for the benefit of my families and the benefit of my students, for them to see me in my likeness and in my presentation and in my fullness. And that gave them themselves a lot of hope, a lot of connection to the school, a lot of love for the school that I led. But I used my Blackness in a way that made the other want and desire me, right? Not exploit me, but want and desire me. Like we cannot sustain, we cannot thrive, we cannot survive if we don't have this Black man president leading our schools. So I started to thrive when I really leaned into my Blackness and started to embrace all the beauty, all the boldness, all the brilliance that is wrapped up in my melanin.
Yeah. Good. Anybody else want to add to that? This is going to be our last question, and I'm going to do some share outs in regards to what it is that you want to share with our general public, and what is necessary and needed for people to know about you and how they can find you or how they can follow you, where they can see you. This is going to be an opportunity for you to advertise what's coming up next. And then for us, as it relates to just wrapping it up, you know, the things that we went over today in those 3 questions, and making sure that we knew, you know, what we wanted and what we wanted to see, and for our children, right? That was the first question, what we want to see for our children. And I think that was great that everybody joined in and said that we need, one, we know that we're behind, but we need to have this communication and contact with our parents, and making sure that we are aligned with what our parents are saying in regards to for our children. We need to be there not only in regards to resources academically, but we need resources in regards to where they are lacking, because we understand the community in which we work. And then moving forward to our freedom, and understanding that that's a continual journey for all of us, right? Claiming our freedom, recognizing that, standing up in that freedom is a continual journey for all of us. And then finally, actually being racialized Black people, and loving the fact that we are Black, and going beyond just surviving in Blackness, but thriving in that existence, and reclaiming ourselves. I can hear Maxine Waters in my mind right now. But it's reclaiming myself, right? I am reclaiming myself. And in that, I am also reclaiming my time. And so I want to thank you guys for being panelists for this Green Book discussion. I want to thank you for us continuing to do this work in regards to solutions. And when we dive into solutions, we're not stopping here with just the conversations, but we are looking to change laws. We're looking to change what buildings look like. Jabari, as principals, as leaders, as directors of new leaders, right? We're looking to change what equity looks like. Candace as an equity fellow and an anti-racist fellow. And we're looking to ask ourselves this prominent question that you brought up, Tashi, was, are you proud of the work that you are putting in front of the children? Whew, that was a powerful question, right? Are you proud of the work that you are putting in front of the children? Is this going to push them to the next level? Is this going to push us in the next level? Are we continue to have this monolithic point of view? Or are we going to be multifaceted, right? And so I really appreciate you guys coming. I'm gonna start with Tashi Jones, because I started with Jabari, and so in alphabetical. So Tashi, you tell us, please, you know, where people can find you, what's up, what's next for you, what are we going to be, you know, what you're going to be doing. So just tell us whatever it is about you and that you would like to share.
Well, thank you, Doctor, for this amazing opportunity. I really love the discourse. Thank you, Candace. Thank you, Jabari. So you can find me on Facebook under as Tashi Nicole, or I also have a cupcake business, and that's Sweet Teas Cupcakery. So I'm working on just growing as an educator, and also tapping into my more entrepreneurial side, and growing my business as well.
Absolutely, right? We have to have multiple streams of income, and whatever else you're good at, do it, right? Just whatever else when you look at our ancestors, they did it all, right? Maya Angelou was a dancer, singer, writer, artist, you know, and so many times we have to stop in a place. Why do we have to stop, right? If you can do it, if you can cook, bake, whatever, do it all. Thank you. Candace?
Oh, absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Candace Renee Person. I am preparing to figure out how exactly we're going to train our incoming staff members on anti-racism with the remote kind of the parameters around remote learning and social distancing, and how are we going to, you know, fit 20 plus teachers in the room for a training. So we're in the process of planning how we're going to train our new staff and our returning staff as we continue our anti-racism journey. I'm in the process of helping my institution become a 100% anti-racist organization. And so that starts with the training of the staff and the personal personal kind of reflection. I am also an entrepreneur and in the process of opening a restaurant. You can find us on Saturdays. We're at Garden of Eden. We are a vegan restaurant. I'm also in the process of learning how to make vegan desserts. And I'll also be selling that at the restaurant as well. So please join us on Saturdays. It's in Springfield, Garden of Eden. And that is how you can find me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'll make sure that I post all of this too down below for everybody. So, okay, all of these chefs and cooks. Okay, Jabari, please tell us how we can find you.
For sure. You can find me at the Garden of Eden. I will be at Candace's restaurant. So that's where you can find me. I'm a huge lover of food, specifically vegan food. So yeah, I love that. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Jabari Peddie. You can also find me at the Teachers Lounge MA. We are we're seeking nonprofit status now, and our purpose is to recruit, revitalize, and retain educators of color and connect them to the people, opportunities, and resources that are going to enhance their practice and advance their careers. So you can find me there. Again, that's at the Teachers Lounge MA. Follow us on Instagram. In my new role, I'm going to make sure that I am pushing my leaders to put equity at the epicenter of everything that they do, from how they screen their future teammates, to how they interact with their families, to how they love on our babies. I'm going to make sure that equity is at the very epicenter of all the schools that they're going to be responsible for leading.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank you all again for being guests today for our Green Book discussions. I am going to leave you with a poem because I am a writer. I'm going to leave you with just a piece of a poem that was just published in Counterpunch. So it was published in Counterpunch magazine. You can find it at counterpunch.org. The poem is called 4 P's, and the P's stand for pyramids, plantations, projects, and penitentiaries. And a piece of this poem, this is the refrain, it goes simply like this. We went from pyramids to plantations, to projects, to penitentiaries. And you think America has love for me? We went from pyramids to plantations, to projects, to penitentiaries, to poplar trees. And you think America wants to give us free? I wanted to leave you just with that piece and let it rest there, right? Can you imagine the lineage from pyramids to hanging on poplar trees and not address the trauma there and with in between? Not deal with that in between, right? I'm saying we as a culture, we have done that. We continue to work with that, but the people who surround us, who stole us from our land, told us to call them master and then hang us from trees. Just let it rest. If you guys have an opportunity, you can check me out at I am Tasha Jones, everything. LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. I am Tasha Jones. Thank you for joining me for Green Book discussions, and we will see you next time. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.